Migration, a common term that we usually hear, but what really is migration? Hi, I'm Kirby. Today we're going to talk all about migration. Migration simply means to move from one country, place, or localities to another. And there are two types of migration. The first one is internal migration, which refers to the people that are moving from one place to another within the country. Let's say, for example, I'm here in Mindanao and I want to go, or I will go in Luzon, specifically in Manila, and that is also considered as migration, and more specifically, it is called internal migration.
The other type of migration is the international migration, in which people will move through borders from one country to another. And there are 5 classifications of it. The first one are the immigrants. Immigrants are those who move or live in a country permanently. The second one are those who are workers, and the example of this are the OFWs, overseas Filipino workers. The third classification are the illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants are those who moved or lived in a country illegally. And the fourth classification are those who are petitioned by their family to live with them in the respective country. And lastly are those who are refugees, who is also called asylum seekers.
Despite the debated issue about the migrant influx, whether they are liabilities to the national development, here is the given data about their contribution to the dollars and in the percentage of the national GDP in 2015 to the following countries. First is in the United States, where they contributed $2 trillion, which is 11% of their GDP. In Germany, they contributed $550 billion, which is 17% of their GDP. In United Kingdom, they contributed $390 billion, which is 14% of their GDP. And in Australia, they contributed $330 billion, which is 25% of their GDP. And lastly, in Canada, they contributed $320 billion, which is 21% of their GDP.
Migrant contribution to destination country in dollars and US percentage of national GDP 2015. The 2013 report on government welfare investing by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, clearly shows that native-born citizens still receive higher support compared to immigrants. Now, the action that must be taken here is that both must be supported fairly, the native-born citizens and the immigrants. The International Monetary Fund predicted that the flow of refugees fleeing the war in Syria and Iraq would actually grow Europe's gross domestic product, or GDP, albeit modestly. I would say that the action that must be taken in here is to stop the war between the two nations. Instead, they must think and do things in their own country and for the better good of their people.
What is a sending country? The term sending state or sending country implies that these countries or states are actively sending or exporting migrants. One of the benefits of being sending country is that there are money sent home by migrants. Even if 90% of the value generated by migrant workers remains in their host countries, they have sent 90 billion back to their home countries. In 2014, the remittances totaled $580 billion. The same year, India held the highest record remittance, followed by China, Philippines, and then Mexico. Remittance changed the economic and social standing of migrants. As we can see today, migrants are commonly having new or renovated homes and the relatives access to new consumer goods.
Large-scale immigrations from developing countries have been provoked by world economic crisis and by reaction to dangers posed by armed conflicts. Migrants eventually induce social, economic, and political problems in receiving countries, including increases in the population, with diverse effects on existing social, increases in demand of goods and services, displacement of nationals from occupations in the countryside and in the cities, increases in the size of the informal sector of the national economy, deterioration in the salary structures of the informal, rural, and urban sectors of the economy, transcultural, occasional loss of customs and tradition by the local population, and the introduction of diseases and social problems. In conclusion, receiving countries must have policies that responsible the presence of economic immigrants and refugees on their territory without this being considered detrimental to the national interest.
Moving on, we will be discussing the problem of human trafficking. Human trafficking is a global problem and one of the world's most shameful crimes, affecting the lives of millions of people in the world and robbing them of their dignity. Traffickers receive women, men, children from all corners of the world and force them into exploitative situations every day. On top of the issue of brain drain, sending states must likewise protect migrant workers. The United States Federal Bureau of Investigation lists human trafficking as the third largest criminal activity worldwide. In 2012, the ILO, or International Labor Organization, identified 21 million men, women, and children as victims of forced labor, and appealing 3 out of every 1,000 persons worldwide. 90% of the victims, or 18.7 million, are exploited by private enterprises and entrepreneurs. Moreover, 22%, or 4.5 million, are sexually abused, and 68%, or 14.2 million, work under compulsion in agricultural, manufacturing, infrastructure, and domestic activities. In order to effectively combat human trafficking, we should let our voice be heard not just with the noise but with the message that contributes solution to the problems of our neighborhood. And we must address this lack of awareness and shared understanding of what constitutes human trafficking, as well as attitudes that keep people from identifying and helping victims of human trafficking.
Integration. Migrants can make a huge contribution to GDP in the host nations, but their access to houses, healthcare, and education is not easy. There is of course considerable variation in the economic integration. Chinese, Indian, and European migrants frequently succeed more, while Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa face greater challenge to secure jobs. In general, due to a variety of reasons, such as navigating unfamiliar practices or learning a new language, immigrants may find it more difficult to seek employment. However, as they adapt to their new environment, this effect normally disappears. Democratic states assimilate immigrants by granting them citizenship and the rights that go with it. So immigrants who have been granted citizenship automatically can have access to what citizens of receiving countries can. This includes public education.
Migrants unwittingly reinforce the tension by keeping among themselves. The first migrant's anxiety at coming to a new and often strange place is migrated by local networks of fellow citizens that serves as the migrant safety net from the dislocation of uprooting oneself. Government and private business have made policy changes to address integration problems, likely using multiple languages in state documents. Training programs completed with counseling have also helped migrant integration in Hamburg and Germany, while retail merchants in Barcelona have brought migrants shopkeepers to break down language barriers while introducing Chinese cultures to citizens. Whether these initiatives will succeed or not remain an open question.
In conclusion, countries whose economies have become entirely dependent on globalization and rely on foreign labor to continue growing will actively court foreign workers. Despite these various contradictions, it is clear that different forms of global interdependence will ensure that global migration will continue to be one of the major issues in the contemporary world. The various responses to these movements, xenophobia, and extreme nationalism in the receiving countries will continue to be the pressing issues. Like globalization, migration produces different and often contradictory responses. Despite these benefits, developer countries continue to excessively limit and restrict migrant labor. And that is the end of our discussion about global migration. We hope that you guys learn from us.